The wind rolled in from the sea, carrying the scent of salt and something ancient. Waves curled and collapsed on the shore, their rhythmic hum lulling me into a rare moment of peace. I had come to this quiet coastal town seeking exactly that, a reprieve from the wreckage of my last relationship. Love had proven itself a sharp-edged thing, and I wanted no part of it. Yet fate, as I would soon learn, had other plans. My foot struck against something half-buried in the sand. At first glance, it was just a smooth, dark stone, worn down by the elements. But as I picked it up, a faint shimmer rippled across its surface, almost imperceptible. I turned it over in my palm, trying to decide if my mind was playing tricks on me. It was heavier than I expected, oddly warm despite the cool evening air. For a brief moment I considered keeping it, but sentimentality wasn't something I indulged in anymore. A voice broke through my thoughts. "You've got an eye for rare things." I turned. A man stood a few feet away, hands in the pockets of a weathered leather jacket, the wind toying with the loose strands of his auburn hair. His features were striking, sharp cheekbones, eyes the color of storm clouds before rain. He was smiling, but there was something guarded behind it, something unreadable. "I doubt it," I said, tossing the stone lightly in my hand. He took a step closer. "Mind if I see?" It was a simple request, and I had no reason to refuse. I held the stone out, and he took it, his fingers brushing against mine. Just a fleeting touch, but it sent a strange pulse up my arm. He studied the object intently, his expression flickering between curiosity and something deeper, something almost reverent. Then, as if realizing he had been staring too long, he handed it back with a casual shrug. "Just a stone, I guess," he said, though his tone didn't quite match his words. I pocketed it, suddenly uneasy. "You always make conversation with strangers on the beach?" He chuckled. "Only the ones holding interesting things." I should have walked away then, but there was something about him, an undeniable pull, like gravity shifting in his presence. Maybe it was the way his voice carried over the waves, smooth and self-assured, or maybe it was the way he looked at me, as if he already knew something I didn't. "I'm Maise," he said, offering his hand. I hesitated before taking it. "Liam." And just like that, a thread had been woven between us. That night, we sat on the sand, talking as if we had known each other for years. He had a way of making the world seem smaller, more intimate. He spoke of distant cities, of fleeting connections, of how some people came into your life like passing storms, brief, intense, and unforgettable. I listened, drawn in despite myself, despite the warning bells in my head. As the sky darkened and the tide crept closer, I pulled the stone from my pocket once more. It felt less significant now, just a forgotten trinket from an unremarkable evening. Without a second thought, I held it out to him. "Here, a souvenir," I said. He looked at me for a long moment before taking it. His fingers curled around it, slow and deliberate. Then, with that same unreadable smile, he slipped it into his jacket pocket. "Guess I'll have to keep this one," he murmured. I didn't know it then, but that simple exchange had just set everything into motion. The days that followed felt like something out of a dream. Maise and I became inseparable, our connection growing with an intensity that both thrilled and unsettled me. It wasn't just the way he spoke. Smooth, confident, like he had lived 100 lives before this one. It was the way he looked at me, like I was something worth unraveling. We spent our mornings exploring the narrow, sun-drenched streets of the coastal town. Our afternoons tangled in conversations over coffee that grew cold between us. He had a way of making the world feel like it revolved around the two of us, as if no one else mattered. And maybe, for a while, I believed him. But beneath the warmth, beneath the easy laughter and stolen glances, something lurked. It started with the phone calls. They came late at night when he thought I was asleep. His voice hushed, his words clipped and careful. I never caught more than fragments. "Not yet." Or, "I told you, I'll handle it." When I asked, he'd smile, press a kiss to my temple, and whisper, "Nothing you need to worry about." Then there were the disappearances. Maise would vanish for hours, always returning with an excuse just believable enough not to question. Lost track of time, or ran into an old friend. But his jacket smelled of places I hadn't been, and his eyes, those stormy eyes that had drawn me in so completely, held secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. One evening, as the sky blushed with the last light of day, we sat on the cliffs overlooking the sea. The wind howled around us, but I only felt the quiet between us, heavy and unspoken. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked suddenly, his voice distant. I frowned. "Leaving where?" "Here. This town. This life." He turned to me, something raw in his gaze. "What if we just disappeared, you and me?" I let out a soft laugh, but he didn't join in. "You're serious?" "What if I was?" A chill ran through me, though the night was warm. "Maise, is there something you're not telling me?" He exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his hair. "There's a lot I haven't told you, Liam." His voice was low, almost hesitant, and for the first time he seemed uncertain. But just as quickly as the vulnerability appeared, it vanished, replaced by that familiar smirk. "But some things are better left unsaid." I should have pushed. I should have demanded answers. Instead, I let the moment pass, let him take my hand and press it to his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath my palm. "Just trust me," he whispered. And I did. I ignored the warnings in my gut, the signs that something was unraveling just beneath the surface. I convinced myself that love was supposed to be this consuming, this reckless. But love wasn't supposed to feel like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into the unknown. I just hadn't realized how far I was about to fall. Maise left without a word. One morning, I woke to an empty bed, the sheets still warm where he had lain. At first, I told myself he had just stepped out, that any moment, he'd return with coffee and that lazy grin that made me forget all my doubts. But the hours stretched, then the day, and by nightfall, the truth settled over me like a lead weight. He was gone. His phone went straight to voicemail. The bar where we'd spent countless evenings had no sign of him. Even the hotel he claimed to be staying at had no record of a Maise ever checking in. It was as if he had never existed, as if I had conjured him from seafoam and fading light. But Maise was real, and so was the ache in my chest. I should have let it go. I should have accepted that whatever we had was never meant to last. Instead, I let my desperation drive me, retracing our steps, searching for answers in the places we once stood together. That's when I saw it. His face, staring back at me from the screen of a news broadcast in a cafe window. Authorities report that a priceless artifact has gone missing from a private collection in the region. The suspected thief remains unidentified, though recent evidence suggests an individual matching this description was last seen near the coastal town. The world seemed to tilt. The picture was grainy, but there was no mistaking him. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted, was a thief. And the artifact? The realization hit me like a crashing wave. The stone. The one I had found. The one I had handed to him so carelessly. It had never been just a stone. The memories rushed back, now sharp with clarity. The way he had reacted when he first saw it. The weight in his voice when he said, "Guess I'll have to keep this one." The late-night calls, the disappearances, the way he had asked if I wanted to leave everything behind. He had played me from the start. Blind rage carried me forward. I wasn't some pawn in his game, some fool to be discarded once I had served my purpose. I had to find him. It didn't take long. Maise was never the type to lay low for long. I found him at the marina, standing beneath the glow of dockside lamps, laughing with another man. He looked at ease, like he hadn't just ripped a hole through my heart. And then, as if sensing me, he turned. For the first time since he vanished, our eyes met. His smile faltered. Just for a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, regret, or maybe just the annoyance of loose ends catching up to him. Then he smirked, tilting his head. Liam, you always did have a way of finding me. I clenched my fists. You used me. His expression didn't change, but his silence spoke louder than words. I had my answer, and now I had a choice. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The night air was thick with salt and something unspoken, something that had always been there between us, even when I hadn't wanted to see it. Maise stood before me, the same man who had once traced constellations along my skin, who had whispered promises that had turned to dust the moment he walked away. But now I saw him for what he truly was. A liar wrapped in charm, a storm that had wrecked me without a second thought. Yet, even now, the sight of him still hurt. Say something, I demanded. My voice came out raw, stripped of all the softness I once held for him. Tell me why. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I didn't plan for you, Liam. His smirk faltered, replaced by something unreadable. You were never part of the job. I laughed, but there was no humor in it, right? I was just collateral damage. You think this was easy for me? His voice sharpened, his mask slipping just enough for me to see something behind it. Regret, maybe, or just another performance. You think I wanted to walk away? I took a step closer, my chest burning with anger, with heartbreak, with everything I had spent weeks trying to bury. Then why did you? He hesitated, and that was answer enough. I shook my head. Doesn't matter anymore. The sound of footsteps approached from behind. I didn't have to turn to know who they belonged to. The authorities I had tipped off before coming here. I had debated it for hours, wrestled with the choice. But in the end, I couldn't let him disappear again, not after everything. Maise's gaze flicked past me, understanding dawning in his storm-gray eyes. You called them, he said. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. Guess I learned a thing or two from you. The officers closed in, their voices sharp, commanding. Maise didn't run. He didn't fight. He just looked at me, really looked at me, like he was memorizing my face one last time. As they cuffed his wrists, he let out a breathless laugh. Hell of an ending, huh? I didn't answer. Couldn't. The last thing I saw before they took him away was the way he smirked, like he had lost the game but still found it amusing. And maybe, in his own twisted way, he had. I stood there long after they were gone, staring at the empty space where he had stood. The waves crashed against the docks, the tide pulling out, taking with it the last traces of whatever we had been. I had loved him, and he had betrayed me, but I had won. And for the first time since he left, I finally felt free.